Okay, so you guys might recall that a few months ago I ended up on a hill in northern Israel that overlooks Lebanon, and it's actually, turns out where we were and where we were looking at is fairly relevant to the news today. If you remember this, the guy telling you what we're looking at here.
The closest point to the border is that area where's the antenna or the tower over there in the hill. That's a community called Dovev. That's the border. You see the curve. That's the border, and nearby there's a chicken farm and Dovev itself. Both were hit by anti-tank missiles. They didn't hit tanks, they hit community, homes, civilians. Electrician was killed there, fixing electricity. People, synagogue was hit in Dovev. You see here, this is a kibbutz Bar'am, also hit so many times by Hezbollah from Maroun al-Ras. This is Maroun al-Ras. You see that village, the highest peak, that's called Maroun al-Ras. By the name Maroun al-Ras, it's supposed to be a Maronite homeland, Maronite town, with people live there, Maronites, but it's not. People who live there are Shia Muslims who support Hezbollah, who Iran with the intelligent officers sitting in it and managing all this region.
So what he said there was not true. Maroun al-Ras was never a Maronite town. It just has the word Maroun in it, which might make you think, there's a reason to believe that might make you think it's Maronite, but it's not. Maroun al-Ras, as far as I know, has been Muslim since, like, for the last 1,000 years. It's been a long while. I don't know if it was ever actually a Maronite town, but it's a pretty significant point now, actually, Maroun al-Ras. If you, like, the camera doesn't capture it very well, but below this hill on the little ridge behind it, this is Bint Ishbail, which is what the IDF used to call the terror capital. It's where they fought a very, very difficult battle in the 06 war, and it's more or less where they realized that Hezbollah were not going to be very easily dealt with. It's where they realized that they were probably going to not achieve their objectives in this place. But Maroun al-Ras is relevant now because you might have remembered me saying in previous streams that for all their military successes, the pagers, the airstrikes, taking out Nasrallah, that doesn't necessarily mean Hezbollah are completely done, right? They've suffered a lot of massive defeats. Israel has achieved about as much as you could possibly expect them to without crossing the border properly. But you notice the last speech that came from the Hezbollah deputy. He was very confident, perhaps for the wrong reasons. He was very confident in just saying, yeah, come on, invade us, bring it on. And that's kind of a meme now. There's a bit of a meme where Hezbollah basically just gets completely clapped. They lose a bunch of their leaders. They suffer a humiliating loss. And then they say, bring it on, old chum. 'Tis but a scratch. Well, there's a tiny bit of truth in it, because one thing that people learned about Hezbollah in 2006 was that they are built more for defense than anything else in these areas. They know the communities, their fighters are parts of these communities, and they have had all the time and space in the world to build up these areas to withstand an invasion. They're very, very good at that. So even though their leader is gone, they're demoralized, their leadership is completely decapitated, their top names are dropping like flies, people are fleeing, people are probably losing faith in them and locally, doesn't change the fact that they are still battle-hardened fighters who have been fighting, some of them for over 10 years in Syria. Doesn't change the fact that they are still parts of these communities. Doesn't change the fact that they still have all the experience and all the wherewithal to withstand incursions. And that seems to already be showing itself. Israel has been pushing into Maroun al-Ras today. They've been fighting with Hezbollah around here. And it seems to be that this is where they've incurred their first losses. As far as I know, there's anything between a handful or maybe a bit more soldiers either dead or injured in close combat with Hezbollah. And I did say a while ago that Maroun al-Ras would be a good, 8 killed, yeah. I do recall saying not long ago that Maroun al-Ras would be a good test for how the war is going to go for Israel at this point, because this is also where they learned that last time. This is actually a picture of them in 2006 fighting in Maroun al-Ras. It's very much expected to be door to door. There are going to be very sophisticated tunnel networks underneath all these areas. The fighters that they're going to be encountering are much more capable than Hamas. They're better equipped and their infrastructure is stronger as well. So there are a lot of reasons that Israel might struggle here. I don't actually know how much they'll struggle, but for reference, the last time Israel fought in Marun al-Ras, the battle lasted about 10 days for this one town. I don't think it was ever actually completely secured. The numbers involved were quite low. I think the numbers of Hezbollah fighters present might have even, some estimates say that it was less than 20 Hezbollah fighters who were actually part of this battle. Other estimates put it up to like 30, 40, 50, but it was a very difficult slog for Israel. Now, there's been a few things that they've learned since then. If you look at the map, there is a little bit of empty land, or kind of like just nature between Marun al-Ras and the border and the blue line. You can see here it's a bit more thick forest areas, and you've seen some of those IDF videos where they're walking up the hills and through the forest, because this land is all very bumpy. It's all very like, you know, you can see here, right? It's very bumpy. There's a lot of woodland. Some of it has been made barren by the Israeli white phosphorus bombs, but the problem was that in 2006, there was one aspect that the Israelis didn't really know about, and it was that a lot of these natural areas had actually been built up by Hezbollah, that they had been built up into tunnel networks, that they had bases embedded in the hills, that they had bases underneath the hills, that they were able to launch rockets from these areas from behind like very thick foliage. And unfortunately, UNIFIL and the IDF before 2006 had no idea this was happening. So they basically got massively surprised. That's why there were loads of ambushes. This is why the Hezbollah rocket fire was able to be consistent all the way through the war, regardless of the Israeli airstrikes. And for whatever reason, the Israelis actually agreed not to strike these areas. They became known colloquially to the IDF as Hezbollah nature reserves. That's what they were called, these areas around here. And you can see recently that the IDF have shown videos of them bombing forests and blowing up locations in forests, because these are understood now to be Hezbollah positions. That actually quite a lot of their positioning is not just in the villages, but it's also in the natural areas around it. And again, it's all very embedded into uneven terrain, into hills, and some of it goes very deep, and a lot of it is, it's all, for a million reasons, is so much more well equipped than anything Hamas has. That's where the famous quote came from the IDF. There was one soldier who said something like, we expected a tent with 3 Kalashnikovs, and what we actually saw was a hydraulic steel door leading to very well-equipped network of underground tunnels. So they were very surprised by this. So they're a bit more prepared for it this time, but I think it's kind of showing you that whatever the IDF are planning here, people say it's a limited incursion. Okay, limited compared to, obviously, to what though, right? They're saying it's limited incursion, and it's only going to go up to what, the Litani, which is like around here. I won't even get a map for that. They say it's only up to the Litani, but that covers quite a lot of ground. The Litani is like here. This is a lot of land. This includes like many villages. Look at this. You got like Tyre is included in this. Binjbeil, Hula. So even up here as well, Marjayoun. It's limited limited does not mean small. Like it doesn't mean it's going to be like it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. These are very difficult areas to get around. It's just like, it's about 10% of the country, yeah. 10-15%. It's about this part here. So I think given the first signs in Marun al-Ras, it looks like they might be in for a slog. I don't know. I don't know how Hezbollah morale is going to stay up if the IDF makes any gains, but so far this is maybe the first sign that Hezbollah are going to be a bit harder to dislodge than people thought. Again, things you achieve from a long distance might not necessarily tell you all that much about what's going on later. Someone's sending me a survey from Marun al-Ras. Yeah, no, Marun al-Ras was never, I don't think it was ever a Maronite town. I think that guy just made that up because he heard it in the name. Or maybe he said it was supposed to be. Maybe it was named by Christians. That wouldn't make sense either. The Maronites were typically from the last 1,000 years, the Maronites have been around here. This has been their area, but yeah. Whatever. That's the latest update of the war. Israel have lost about 8 people now in Marun al-Ras. There's one other village that they're fighting in right now, but we can already see that things are just going to probably reach a bit more of a brutal stage of the war. Urban fighting is never easy. It's definitely not easy with fighters who are as experienced and well-equipped as Hezbollah. So, and this is something that should have been given, because without a command structure, without anything else, without strong leadership, these guys can still separate into amorphous kind of cells. Like, they're not a traditional army. They're not a traditional army. They're not a guerrilla force. They're too big and sophisticated to be that, but they're amorphous enough to handle this kind of thing. So, yeah, not good. It's only the first day. Who knows? But seems like it's going to be a slog. Also, basically every soldier that's died today is like 23 or under. Yeah. So they're probably standing up to fucking Hezbollah fighters who have been in combat since these young IDF soldiers were still pissing themselves and shit. So, do you have any recommendations for books or articles in the background of all this? Yeah, it's called Wikipedia. That's what it's called. Wikipedia. There is a book that I've been reading a bit of, which seems actually quite well done. It's by historians, even though it's 2006, which means there's not going to be that much, if any, archive evidence, like documentary evidence. But what's it called again? Is it just called 34 Days? This book, Israel, Hezbollah, and the War in Lebanon. This is apparently, it's like pretty detailed. It's a very long book. It's like 300 pages. And it tells you a lot about cabinet deliberations and things like that from the Israeli side. So, yeah, this is probably a pretty decent book on it. It's the biggest source I've seen on it so far. Anyway. What type of combat were they doing in Syria? They were doing like sieges. They were leading operations. They were capturing cities, towns, villages. Lots of urban warfare. They were also training the Syrian soldiers as well, because the Syrian soldiers were kind of shit. How they look like versus 2006. Again, it's hard to tell. We'll know within about 5 or 10 days. I think Marun al-Ras is probably a good marker for that, because we know how that battle went last time. It lasted about 10 days. The Israelis just about secured it, but only barely. Yep, see how that compares. I mean, here's a list of the Hezbollah fights in Syria. Siege of Homs, Battle of Al-Qasir. This is where there was one of the massacres. Aleppo. Yeah, so they've done a lot of urban warfare and siege warfare. They were fighting ISIS as well. They were, yeah. They fought with ISIS, some Al-Qaeda, some Free Syrian Army. Then they fought with Turkey at one point. But yeah, they're at a very different stage of the war, and I think this should have been fairly predictable. It maybe wasn't that easy to guess how disoriented Hezbollah would be, but it shouldn't be surprising that this is going to be a bit of a turning point. We'll know within about 5 or 10 days, I imagine, how we can compare it to last time for that particular area. Here's some of the footage if you want to see it, just for reference to what I'm talking about.
Overnight, the idea.
Whoa! But when I'm talking about the nature reserves, you can see here, they're just kind of like walking through.
Days we're going to.
You can see they're just kind of walking through this forestry and shrubbery or whatever you call it. Lots of uphill, downhill, a hatch built into the fucking hills, where there's probably an incredibly sophisticated tunnel network underneath that, and a base, and munitions and stockpiles. Also, these are special forces raids that have been happening throughout the year, fighting all kinds of weaponry. Trenches. But this is the stuff that in 2006, Israel had no intelligence on this. They didn't know about it. They just learned the hard way that this was something Hezbollah was doing. They thought it would all be urban warfare. They didn't actually know that these areas here and here and here would potentially have bases in them, just like in the middle of the woods. That's them, I think, finding the entrance to a tunnel in a children's bedroom. Not uncommon. Lots more weaponry than they find in the Hamas locations, seems to be. This will be them bombing one of the Hezbollah nature reserves. Some secondary explosions. There we go. Boom, boom. There's another one. There's another one. Each one of those had secondary explosions, which means there would have been weapons underneath them. Unless they were detonating stuff that they'd planted underground. I don't know. Lebanon's quite green. Yeah, it's kind of one of the only parts of the Middle East where you'll see snow-capped mountains as well. Oh, look at this! Just having a door, this little doorway built into the built into the hills. RPGs, mines. The amount of mines they seem to be finding. Again, look at this door. Because again, Hezbollah has a land connection from Iran through Iraq, Syria into southern Lebanon. So they can import whatever they want, really. They can import quite a lot. This is basically Hamas with no blockade. And much more useful terrain as well. Like a lot of these tunnels are lined in concrete as well. It's them gathering Hezbollah material. The amount of landmines would suggest that the defense is a big part of their planning. They haven't destroyed Hamas, so I don't know how they're going to destroy Super Hamas. The only difference is, maybe it's a fairly big one. A fairly big difference here is that there's a lot more diversity of opinion in Lebanon than there is in Gaza, I think. Because there are lots of people in Lebanon who hate Hezbollah and actually have some kind of intention or maybe some desire to want Hezbollah gone, to want to see the back of them. So political pressure would be part of it as well. But it's also the fact that there's been a lot more room for civilians in the south of Lebanon to evacuate. It's not like Hezbollah can just move their forces all over Lebanon, right? They only have so many areas they can go to. I don't know how much that means. It just means that Hezbollah has like the entire south of Lebanon, like the Shia areas of Lebanon are still larger and more difficult to traverse than the entirety of the Gaza Strip, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know how much that would change it. They still have a pretty big playground. I mean, so far it seems like Israel has been more competent, like much, much more competent than 2006. But again, the losses in Marun al-Ras still show you that there's like one particular part of Hezbollah that makes it slightly tougher to crack. But okay, who knows? Who knows? It's also the fact that although Hezbollah are local, they are organic in the sense of them being the Shia population of Lebanon, but they're also foreign. They're also Iranian funded and backed. And especially if they start to feel like they're being betrayed by Iran or being let down, then that could obviously shake out their resolve a lot more. Whereas Hamas are like 100% local. They're not tied to Iran in the same way that Hezbollah is. I guess Hezbollah didn't expect Israeli ground operations. I don't know. I mean, in a sense, they're naturally prepared because they've got tunnel systems and they've got soldiers who are willing to fight till the death in their communities. But no, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. We'll see. Too soon to say, but first day of fighting in larger communities, not good for Israel, not good. That kind of fighting will lead to casualties. It's not about incompetence. It's about what fighting you are trained for and how good your info is. Yeah, but I mean, remember the numbers in these battles are quite small. So this is the Battle of Marun al-Ras for 10 days in 2006. The IDF lost 8 soldiers, and Hezbollah lost anything between 7 and 26. These are small. Yeah, these fights are not that big. It's just that they're very slow and sluggish and intense. I think Israel losing 8 guys, and I don't think all 8 of the people who died were all in this particular area though, because there were other areas where they had injuries and casualties as well. But yeah, I don't know. 5 were from the same battle. Which one? Marun al-Ras? Or, yeah, there was a tank that got hit, yeah. Well, at least Hezbollah get to use their anti-tank weapons on tanks this time. It's refreshing. There's an account still tracking Hezbollah casualties. Oh, for funeral invitations. So they stopped in the 23rd, but in the last week, apparently there were 103 fatalities. And that would be, I mean, if 500 people died in that, what day was the 500 dead? That was after the 23rd, wasn't it? That was on the 23rd. Does that mean really? Does that mean that they only killed 100 Hezbollah for 500 out of 500? I guess this might be incomplete, but because if this is only tracking funeral invitations, there probably is going to be a bit more than that. It might not even be that surprising because it's like, again, you can even have a military target like a rocket or a weapon stockpile, and it's in a house, but the only people in the house at the time are civilians. So yeah, that's a whole thing. I don't know if you become a combatant because Hezbollah have stored a rocket in your house. I don't think you do. Especially if you haven't done it voluntary. Yeah.